Yeah, no, I mean, this is a huge question, of course, but perhaps a simple way to start answering is to point out exactly what Lacan, let's say, did in his return to Freud. He simply read Freud. And this, I think, is absolutely crucial because what you mentioned earlier, okay, one hears about Freud more or less dismissively, and then one hears about a couple of whatever doctrines that he's supposed to, theories that he's supposed to advocate, but really this is not Freud. Freud's thought, Freud's investigations, Freud's research, this is something so much alive. I mean, I really would strongly encourage people simply to start reading Freud. This is such a vivid, I mean, this was at least my experience. With Freud, you don't need many secondary literature and explanation. I think with Freud, it's actually very good to begin with Freud. And because it is also a theory in making. And it is precisely when you reduce it to some ready-made doctrines or theses, then you lose really the most important things in it. Because Freud was constantly, he was also like changing his position or reconfiguring his concepts and so on, because he actually was eager to get it in some way. And so, and he was doing this live with live material, so to say. So it's really extremely, extremely good experience to just try to read Freud and try to read him perhaps precisely without all these additional information about this that has accumulated through the century. Everybody thinks they know what Freud is, but just to try to listen with as little as prejudice as possible to read what is going on. And it's exciting to read not only the case histories, which obviously are exciting, it's like almost crime novels, but also these other more conceptual theoretical books. It's really an exciting thing to read, and there is a thought which is alive. And Lacan's gesture was precisely to get rid of this institutionalized Freud, which was also, there were different Freudian orientations, let's say, but different schools, one emphasizing this or the other rather this, but there was this kind of very, very strong institutionalization of Freud, and Lacan simply said, okay, let's read some Freud. Let's say what is alive there, what he does, how he reopens certain questions, why people don't see some other things in it. So, and I think this is precisely what is the first important thing, to simply read Freud, and then very quickly you get to see how all these notions, starting with repression and sublimation, which are absolutely crucial, but have a much, not much more complicated, but I would say much more interesting texture than simply this kind of idea that, okay, there is the society and we enter it as some kind of innocent or guilty substance, and it just tells us what to do, how to do it, represses and causes all this repression, which then further operates through many different channels. So, of course, Freud's idea, it was that civilization, part of civilization was this kind of no, as you put it, this kind of prohibition as a certain way in which society symbolically organizes its functioning. But it was also his discovery that it's not simply that without this, let's say, if we can think about some ideal state before the law, let's put it, there was some kind of absolute freedom, and then the law, the society came and put an end to this freedom, and now we suffer because of all this repression. I think what Freud clearly saw is that what you had, I mean, it's not some, if you imagine some kind of primordial state, it's a chaotic state, which is far from freedom in the sense that would kind of really emancipate you. It's something which is rather chaotic and resembling some kind of original state which is not actually free. So, but then he also realized, and Lacan emphasized this very strongly, how there is a certain interplay between, let's say, some kind of a impossibility or some kind of impasse, some kind of contradiction that is there in this imaginary state before the law or whatever, and the law itself. And the reason why, let's say, the law and these prohibitions often have such a hold on us, and why they kind of have this power to organize the society, is precisely because they also give a symbolic form to this impossibility inherent in this chaotic state itself. So it's not simply, or one way of putting it is that a kind of impossibility is some kind of impotence, let's say more like, or frustration, impotence is elevated to the status of symbolic impossibility. So, or to put it where something that you cannot do in any way, physically, let's say, becomes prohibited. Very often symbolic prohibitions are the prohibitions of the impossible. And this is not just stupid, there is something that changes in the nature of what your frustration or your impasse is when it becomes articulated in the law. So I'm not saying that this justifies all the legal whatever prohibitions, but there is something in the structure of the law itself, which is also an answer to some, let's say, impasse or difficulty, which is not simply so this is why these dialectics, why sometimes it is actually liberating to have a certain kind of no, because and why then to some extent we often hang on to prohibition rather than, so the freedom kind of only starts there, and how we then tackle with these prohibitions and so on, this kind of symbolic rules. So this simple idea that there is some kind of authentic, whatever, free and pleasurable, whatever circuit of desires, which is then brutally interrupted by the law and forces us to repress things, is not, there is a complicity, let's say, between the chaotic of drives and the law. Law is not simply on the other side of drives, but also, as Freud said, it fits on the drives. It's kind of, so there is a certain circularity in the way in which the two are articulated. So, this is also why it is for Lacan also, but already for Freud, why it is much too simplistic to say that once, if we just get away from all these prohibitions, we will finally breathe freely. Okay, this is a well-known quote from Karamazov brothers, the Dostoevsky novel that Lacan comments on, and I'm sure you know it, when this father says, okay, now God is dead, so God as the source, symbolic locus of prohibition, let's say, God is dead, everything is permitted, everything is allowed. And Lacan says, you see, this is precisely what Freud discovered, that it is the opposite, that it is true. Once God is dead, in the sense of this, then nothing is allowed anymore. And this is how Lacan reads the very, let's say, emergence of all these neurotic disorders that Freud was started with. But this does not mean, okay, we should reinvent God and some severe prohibitions. This is not what I'm saying. It's just that to point that the dialectics between the two is more complicated, more interesting, and also if you want to think of freedom in any kind of politically also meaningful way, you need to take both into account. So it's not simply let's get rid of all the laws, or let's just have all the laws and forget about anything else. It is precisely their complicity and this kind of thing that is interesting. Sorry, this was a very long, and I'm sure I didn't even address half of the question that you asked.